canceling the trip. It hadn't yet occurred to me that perhaps my true voice had nothing to do with singing at all. Up to that point in life, I had limited my own capacity to do good in this world to music, not knowing and not yet seeking to discover if God had different, bigger, deeper plans for my life. I sincerely wanted to serve Him and to use my gifts and talents in ways that honored Him, but my life had become so cluttered with obligations and expectations, I had forgotten how to listen. In the past, I'd often considered the concept of hearing God's voice as something mystical and put an inordinate amount of pressure on myself to hear it and be in His will. I often felt like a disappointment or failure if I couldn't discern it. My self-doubt then led to fear that I might stray to the right or left and just mess up everything. I was at a crossroads. I could either bemoan the situation of silence or embrace it as a learning opportunity. It wasn't easy, but I opted for the latter. I chose to have a teachable spirit, to learn how not just to hear, but to listen to God's voice all over again. And I decided to go to India after all. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Looking back, I know that even though the doctor had ordered it, the Lord silenced my voice for that trip. He enabled me to hear His voice and the voices of those who had been silenced for too long. As I listened, I began to hear His still, small voice. A silent journey. She didn't make a sound. She wasn't screaming or asking for help. She was staring silently and almost vacantly through the metal bars. For a brief moment, we locked eyes. Even then, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Through a second-floor window in the middle of Mumbai's red light district, I saw a child who couldn't have been more than 6, locked in a cold metal cage. The sight floored me. Even more devastating, though, was the utter lack of hope and resignation I sensed in her eyes, as if she were reconciled to the fact that this was her lot in life. At a tender 6 years of age, this child's spirit was broken, just one of the millions of victims of human trafficking around the world. Peering into her silent hell, I was stunned. I grabbed my husband's hand, and he saw what I saw. Side by side, we became witnesses to one of mankind's most heinous atrocities. Even more abhorrent, she wasn't alone. They were as young as 5. Tiny, beautiful, broken, terrified. Their eyes were sad, heavy, like they were carrying an overwhelming weight. Girls, children, bought and sold like property, ravaged over and over with no defense, like a walking nightmare. They were silent. They hadn't been able to speak for themselves in years. Their voices extinguished by fear, tossed around in a maelstrom of injustice, choking in a fire of depravity that they didn't start. I couldn't help but wonder, where was God in this? Where was the voice of the Redeemer, speaking and acting on behalf of these young girls? And then, out of the void created by evil emerged the faintest sound of hope. With my ears tuned in more acutely to this quiet rustling, the noise grew stronger, louder, and clearer. Then, as if everything else in the world had gone quiet, the sound became a distinct voice uttering a singular word. You. God had not abandoned these girls. He had not backed away, allowing this injustice to go on forever. He had sent help. He had sent others, like those in the organization that had brought me on this trip to India, to represent and restore the voices of so many who were preyed upon by corruption. And now, He wanted to send me. He had shaped inside of me a heart that was meant to be broken by the horror I was seeing. He had developed a platform and a sphere of influence in my life that He had now given a very clear purpose. I was Natalie Grant, recording artist, award-winning musician, performer. I made my living using my voice. I felt God asking me, would I be willing to use my voice to serve these women? Right then and there in the dusty streets of Mumbai, heavy with the weight of pain and hopelessness around me, I became a different Natalie.